Hey everyone, this is Tamara from Seraphim Center for Healing and Education based in Oakland, Northern California. I am making this video to answer some questions that have come up in the current Holy Fire 3 Reiki, Usui Reiki level 1 and 2 class. I want to start by just saying a couple of things that these are just my opinions. They're my perceptions, and as you know, the real answers lie within you, and they come from your divine wisdom. However, I'm honored to serve as a guide on your journey, and I hope my answers trigger, not trigger, but that my answers sort of assist on that path of you activating your own knowing. My answers are not the absolute truth, they just offer a different perspective. And there are so many gifts in receiving different perspectives. Sometimes we have to listen to different perspectives to activate our own knowing. And even our own knowing is evolutionary, it changes as we go through life's experience. So, with that said, I have received some really profound questions over the last 10 days from my Reiki students. And this is to answer those questions, of course, but also help others who have similar questions. So, I'll start with the first question. Some are, they're very different. The questions have a spectrum. One of the questions that came up has to do with the duality of light and dark. This student of mine went to see, I'll just say, maybe saw a psychic or received a reading, and they told her all these things about darkness attacking her, things like that. The essence of the question has to do with the duality of light and dark. What do we do with that when we feel like, something is attacking us, or we're open to darkness? And what I want to say about this is I want to validate my students' experience. There are different energies operating in the world. We even see the manifestation of it in our own human realm. There's duality, first of all, inside of us. We constantly kind of go in and out of light and shadow within ourselves, but sometimes a person can lean more towards the higher energies of the spectrum of consciousness, which are unconditional love, compassion, joy, peace, and courage. And then some people lean towards the lower vibrations. And in the realm of light, this is true. In the realm of spirit, this is true as well. There are beings who are made of 100% pure luminous light, like archangels Michael, Gabriel, Christ, Kuan Yin, Mother Mary, Isis. And then there are beings that create interference. They are on the lower vibrational end, and they create interference. And my insight around this is the more you do your inner work, the more you increase your capacity to hold light. So within your grid, you do your inner work and you transmute and alchemize the density that is in your grid. And therefore, by alchemizing the density, you increase your capacity to hold light. And the stronger your auric field gets, right? So these gaps in the auric field and these holes and cords and sort of the energetic mechanisms through which you are leaking out energy or welcoming in energies that you don't need, or there's density in your field. All of that affects how you hold your own unique light. And so the more you do your inner work, the stronger this field gets from within, all around you, and the less interference you receive. But at the same time, it's prudent to invoke protection. When, just like in our daily life, it's prudent to invoke protection. And that invocation can come in many ways. There are a million and ways to invoke protection, but I do recommend it. I do recommend invoking protection around you. And I won't give you a certain way today, but I'll just say the more you invoke protection combined with doing your work, alchemizing density combined with spending time around beautiful things, music, art, nature, people that you love, the stronger this field gets. And the less they interfere, the less you'll be affected less by the interference that's coming in. Now, another thing I wanted to mention is it's very easy to go into fear, the energy of fear, especially when, let's say, you go to a medium or a psychic, or someone tells you there is a curse in your family and demons are attacking you and this and that. And it's very easy to go into the energy of fear. And my advice is don't engage with this duality so much. It's there. The duality is everywhere in the universe. It's there. It's true. But don't engage so much with it. Instead, shift your awareness and attention and focus on, this is for my Reiki students, but also others, shift to practicing healing modalities. If you're a Reiki student or practitioner, shift to giving yourself self-healing. Shift to spending time in nature, to exercising, and to, at the same time, invoking protection. So that combination of not going into fear, not engaging with this duality so much, while being cognizant of it and taking necessary steps to protect yourself, is magical. So there's that first question. Let me take a sip of water. Okay, let's move on. Then we had a question come up in class, which was why one hand felt warm and the other didn't. And I see that as one of the hand chakras was open more than the other. So I recommended that my student actually Reiki the chakra that less Reiki is coming out of it, just to sort of open it. And so that's just like a small question I want to address, but that's something that came up in class. Okay, now there are some profound questions that have come up that I want to go over. And the first question: how do we truly forgive ourselves and or those who have caused us harm? Is this a process that happens over and over until we have outgrown that situation? I feel myself outgrowing specific people, situations, unfinished business dynamics, and offering these energies to source while I'm practicing. Yet I wonder if some concrete actions also need to take place in the material world around forgiving oneself or others. Today, Okay, so this question has to do with forgiveness. In my perception, and just having gone through this journey of inner healing for many years, forgiveness is multi-layered. It's multi-layered. It comes in layers. There's no absoluteness about it. It's not a linear energy. It comes in layers and it cannot be forced, whether it's forgiveness towards the self or forgiveness towards others. What seems to be the antidote, not the antidote, but what seems to facilitate the progression of falling and anchoring into the vibration of forgiveness is higher awareness, higher awareness, higher perspective of the whole situation. Just sort of going above the situation. Why did this happen? What did I learn from it? Seeing the other person and their circumstances, going above it, gaining that spirit, higher self, higher perspective, and then slowly, as the wounding or the energy of that situation or event or circumstance is shifted, there is room that opens up for unconditional love of the self, and the room opens up to gain higher perspective, and then forgiveness of the self and others begins to sort of naturally step in. What I find to be quite powerful in amplifying this process is to look at sort of what was the learning from that situation, how did it motivate us, and then anchoring those lessons in this lifetime, every lifetime, all the lives in between, releasing the wounding, the energy, the shock, trauma, whatever you want to call it, of that into the love and light and unconditional energy of the universe, creator, God, source, and then gaining higher perspective and then naturally transitioning into forgiveness. And the process of forgiveness, just because I went through a couple of 2 decades of multi-layered sort of unfoldment of forgiveness towards a family member, and every time I thought it was over and it wasn't, there was another layer that had to come in, like a more subtle layer of forgiveness. And I think acceptance of that multi-layered process in itself opens up room so we can then tap into the different vibrations of forgiveness. So that's what I kind of want to say. And yes, we can set intention to embody forgiveness. We can set intention to embody creating room for forgiveness and embodying higher perspective so forgiveness can be activated. I hope that helps. Another question that has come in. Similarly, this question is not about forgiveness, it's about grief. The student expresses that they don't see grief as a pathology or something that needs to be pathologized, that like any emotion, it needs space to move through the body and flow through the body. And then the question is, I'm curious about working on oneself or others if they are coming to you for support with moving grief through their body. Is it the same as working on a recurring bladder issue, for example, or is it different? That's a really deep question. I would say no, grief is not a pathology. Grief is just another emotion. And the bladder issue might have something to do with the grief, but this is really like the pathology, the disease, like whatever discomfort is in the body can also obviously have psychospiritual emotional roots. But back to grief, I think what helps with grief, whether you are holding space for someone or you are witnessing them holding space for themselves or both, is the lack of judgment and the mere act of witnessing with unconditional love this energy of grief. It's not a pathology. Grief is a natural emotion. So the initial stage of working with grief for yourself or others, in that initial stage, it's really helpful to not necessarily go to the defensive, but just to see it for what it is, just to witness it with compassion, with unconditional love. Witness it, hold space. If it's with Reiki, hold space with Reiki. And yes, through that unconditional witnessing, the grief begins to flow and it begins to change. It begins to shift. It's not up to us what it shifts to. If it's a dense energy, sort of clogging the space, clogging the channels in our field within us, it's gonna start sort of decalcifying. Sometimes grief shifts to acceptance. Sometimes it shifts to anger, actually. Sometimes it transmutes and lifts, but then anger begins to show itself that was hidden. Sometimes grief changes to forgiveness. It shifts. Depends. Each person's circumstances are different. I always say I was born understanding grief. I am so attuned to grief. I'm an emotional empath specifically around grief. I understand it. I can detect it in people. One time I did an ancestral healing session on my father's mother's lineage, and I cried, wept for 3 weeks with grief. It was the grief of my ancestors for what they went through. Once the grief transmuted in my system, once it shifted, my heart could hold more joy. I found myself almost childlike. I was laughing more. I could feel joy more, but that was just my case. Maybe in someone else's situation, the grief would shift and then forgiveness would come in or acceptance would come in, or again, deeper layers of emotions would show up. So it's not a pathology. It's an absolutely beautiful emotion, actually, in a sense, but it does, excess of it creates density in our system. So light energy cannot flow. And so be open to witnessing it compassionately and lovingly, and be open to whatever needs to happen. Sometimes it moves, sometimes it shifts, sometimes nothing happens. So that's sort of what I have to say about grief. Another question that has come in is it says the core of my question here is, how does one not take on other people's stuff in the process of working with them? Are there circumstances where we shouldn't practice Reiki on anyone? In all the years that I've done Reiki, I saw that initially when I was practicing Reiki, I was taking on more of people's energies, mainly because I wasn't taking care of myself the way I should have. Meaning, I didn't quite understand the significance of how important it was for me to take care of myself and create space in between sessions. That's the most significant lesson I've learned in the last 13 years is there is a direct relationship between self-care and how much of a channel we become, pure channel we become for Reiki. So by self-care, what I mean is movement, what I mean is salt baths, what I mean is silence, space to be joyous, space to go to nature. Because even if you take on something from someone, if you practice movement or yoga or qigong or you jog, you go to the ocean, you go hiking, you take care of yourself, you eat well, the energies are going to shed out. And you also become a much more pure channel of Reiki energy the more you take care of yourself. So my advice is there is that direct relationship is up your self-care as you up your Reiki practice. Create room between sessions. Do your own self-healing to transmute density so you can become more of a pure channel, to transmute things that you may have taken on from the collective or from sessions. Also, I would say invoke protection. We are absolutely supported by so many beings of light that hold space for us as we practice Reiki. So invoke protection around you, hydrate, create space between sessions. Progressive building up of the amount of time you spend in sessions is important. This is why my Reiki 1 classes are just focused on self-healing, and then we slowly build up, working with friends and family, slowly, 20 minutes at a time, and then we build up. That's my recommendation on that. There are cases where I'm sure there are people who come into sessions drunk or intoxicated, or they do, I don't know, people who do a lot of drugs. But again, I don't know if I'm offering solid advice on this one, because in all the years I've practiced Reiki, I've never had to tell someone that I can't practice on them. But I imagine if someone like walked into my office unstable, mentally unstable or drunk, I wouldn't do Reiki on them. I've never heard of not doing Reiki on someone out of surgery. That's not something I know much about. I would imagine it actually helps their healing process. I would say mental instability is a good example, because Reiki does activate healing, and I think a mentally unstable person needs grounding. So even if you were to give them Reiki, I would just focus on Reikiing their grounding channels and not the upper chakras, just sort of helping them ground and be centered. I did have someone contact me from a mental institution, and I did ground their energy. I've given Reiki to someone in a coma per her daughter's request, once a week I would go in, and she received it beautifully. I could feel her energy receiving it. Please use your intuition, please use your divine wisdom on this, because I haven't come across a case yet where I've said no, but you might. So use your intuition, use your own knowing, and you will know what to do. Another question that I found important is we talked about doing biosen, which is in Japanese, it's called disease line or dis-ease line. And this student says, I don't necessarily want to be searching for disease within myself, so I'm feeling like I need a bit of reframe here, and I'm switching it to asking, where does my body need some extra support today? I feel that the falling into pathology of symptoms and creating an identity around it is something that can become a behavioral pattern that keeps stagnant energy in its place. It also feels tied to a belief system that the medicine that I need to heal is out there or beyond me, when in fact it's right here within. I don't think there's a clear question. Just would be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Well, biosen means disease line. It's just a direct translation. You don't need to attach to that name. What we are actually detecting through biosen is exactly what you said. Where is it that my Reiki hands need to go? Where is it that I need extra support of this Reiki energy? So you can reframe it in that way. But the direct translation is disease line, which is why it's mentioned in class. The medicine you need is within you, but it is also all around you. We are not isolated from the universe. So it is within you and it is all around you. We are a field of energy in constant dialogue with the universe. It's in the stars, it's in the sun, it's in the moon, it's in a good friend, it's in the ocean, it's in the land, it's within, it's all around. So your Reiki hands are pulling from all of that medicine, and you can reframe it as, where is it that my system needs the highest support today? And as you place your hands there, pull from all of that medicine and direct it to that place. That's my feedback on that. Biosen is incredibly powerful. I think what you need here is a little bit of a reframing of the terminology, which is, I actually love. I love the way you presented it, the student presented it. So one of my students said that in self-healing, they haven't really had a moment of that popping of energy, or that little hint of like, when it's time to move into the next one. Does this mean they need more practice? Yes, absolutely. It takes time to anchor into that voice or that signal. It's just like any other thing. It's just like any other thing. I remember when my husband started playing electric guitar like in his early 50s, it was so fragmented. And now when he plays, it's so harmonious, like it flows. He moves from one note to the other at the right place. And it's the same with Reiki. With practice, you know when it's time to move. You're tuned into the intuitive intelligence of the hands, into that signal, the knowing. It's not necessarily a popping. That's just one way that Reiki communicates with you, your Reiki hands communicate with you. It's a knowing. It's an intuitive knowing. It's a temperature change. It's so many. There's so many ways you're gonna know when it's time to move. So please keep practicing. Stay with it. Stay with it. And in time, you will find your own unique way of communicating through that flow. Beautiful question. Another question I had is, how do we sort of Reiki practitioners or spiritual practitioners engage in sexual activity that is grounding? I guess I had mentioned in class that there is an energy exchange in human social interactions and sexual interactions. And how do we engage in that activity in a way that feels good? And I would say that just like a social interaction, sexual interaction has to do with the unique vibration of each individual. And so as two beings that are a vibrational match, as two beings that are of similar vibration. Similar, I don't mean identical. A vibrational match, I almost don't have a word for it. They come together, and there is actually alchemy that can be created through sexual activity, like literal alchemy. It can be a really healing experience. I think the opposite of it is true when, for instance, a codependent person and a narcissist engage in any interaction, not just sexual interaction. So I would focus more on who we are engaging with, whether it's sexual or social, and do what is for our highest good. Choose people we want to engage with that are for our highest good, that hold more unconditional love, that hold a lot of compassion, that we're compatible with. And every interaction with that person then brings light frequency, brings alchemy, not just sexual activity. Speaking with them, sitting next to them, eating with them, dialoguing with them, sexual activity, everything. It's not just about the sexual activity. So personally, I'm very select. I've been married for 20 years, but always I was selective about who I engaged with on that level. But there were some instances where the person I was engaging with was not good for me, and I took a blow into my sacral chakra particularly. So that higher discernment comes in. So I would focus on setting intention for higher discernment, the highest definition of discernment of who to engage with sexually for our highest benefit, for highest alchemy, highest healing. So that's what I wanted to say about that. And then another question was, when you're called to becoming more visible, to sharing your voice, sharing your work, how do sensitive, empathic, sensitive people balance that sort of sharing and being visible and being in between all the words? The exact question is, how do we as empathic folks, highly sensitive people, balance being in between all of the worlds? This is something I can really talk about. Is I am empathic, I'm highly sensitive too, and for years I struggled with being more visible. I wanted to be in my cocoon. I wanted to be hidden. I wanted to, it was more comfortable to be less visible. But what I've come to over the years is, as my higher dharma got activated of service, I started and I transmuted these core beliefs such as it is not safe to be seen, it is not safe to share your gifts. It can be from childhood, from ancestors, from past lives. It's not safe to speak your truth. As those core beliefs begin to transmute over time and your higher heart, your higher dharma gets activated, there is a confidence, there is a discernment and a confidence that doesn't creep in, that is called in. There is a sense of trust and faith and a sense of safety in being visible. And you learn the balance, the art of how do I practice this visibility while also taking the time to nourish myself, to nurture myself. So that discernment comes in, the balance of, okay, I'm gonna go, like for instance, I'm gonna make this video and post it on YouTube, my YouTube channel. I'm gonna make this video for the highest good of whoever needs to hear it. At the same time, after this, I'm gonna take time to nurture myself, to restore my system. So that higher discernment and balance comes in together with the confidence and the faith and trust. And that's the balance that's really helpful in this case. Okay, beloveds, I noticed I left my wire downstairs, my charger. So the computer, let's see how much battery it has. Oh no, it still has some battery. So I think there's one other question. The students said that they're reading a book called The Science of Getting Rich. And in this book, the author mentions that one should cut the cord psychically and on all levels with disease, and instead imprint the vibration of health and wellness into the subconscious. Yes, absolutely. That's the higher vision. That is the higher vision, is to transmute, alchemize whatever is in the subconscious that is in the way of absolute health, our birthright, the absolute abundance, the absolute wellness and alignment with that highest abundance. We transmute those layers, and we tap into that original blueprint of alignment with health and wellness. Beautifully said. What a beautiful note to end this video on. I love you all, and I look forward to more and more and more questions. Have a blessed week ahead. Thank you. Bye.